Hey, in this video, I'm going to give you a quick walkthrough the rules to my prototype board game, Dwarven Mind Shenanigans. You can see it out on dannyburble.com. It's actually very close to being finished. I'm just getting the art in, and I'll throw up some art on screen as we go so you can see what's coming up. This version of the video is going to take like a slow walk through the rules. There's going to be another video for like just a quick crash course in the rules. And then there's another video that will show you actually some gameplay. And I feel like the actual gameplay is way easier than the slow walk through the rules. So let's just get started. In Dwarven Mine Shenanigans, the Dwarven mines have been overrun by goblins, and the dwarves have started to boast about who can get the furthest cleaning up the mines on their own. And it's turned into a big thing. The king has gotten involved, and the king has started to offer money as well, so now the dwarves are betting on who can go farther, and the king is paying out any dwarven team that goes in and comes out. The king is going to pay 1 gold per head. You gear up, you make a bet on which tunnel you're going to get past, and then you go in. In head-to-head game, you're going to see who can get further. As you go through the tunnels, if you match your bet, you'll get paid off for that. And at the end of 3 runs through the tunnels, the team with the highest trophy wins. This is a setup for a 4-player game. We've got 2 dwarves on one team, 2 dwarves on the other team. They're going to go through the tunnels and they're going to go head to head. So 1 player would control 1 dwarf. You could also have a 3-player game by taking one of these dwarves out and having a team of 2 versus a team of 1. You can have a 2-player where one player controls 2 dwarves, 1 player controls the other, and they go head to head. Or you can have 2-player where each person takes 1 dwarf and they go head to head. Or you can remove the second team altogether and have a 2-player or a 1-player game that is just solitary on one side and do co-op. Either way, you're going to go to see as far as you can get and to get the highest trophy. I'm just going to go through all the pieces real quick and then I'll explain the things individually. This is a full setup. To set up, you have your dwarves along the bottom here. There's 4. Each dwarf has 5 of these translucent counters. The tunnel decks go down the center. There's 5 tunnels. Shuffle them separately and put them in order. Leave some space in between each tunnel. There's 2 forge cards where you'll be buying your stuff. There's a bunch of trophies which are set aside for the moment. Also, you have a reserve of gold called the Hoard and a reserve of dice. Here you have a tunnel tracker for the team on the left and a tunnel tracker for the team on the right. They each have a counter on them set to 1. And above that, there's a run tracker, which tracks your runs through the tunnels, and it has a counter on 1. At the start, a team of 2 dwarves is going to start with 100 gold to share. A team of 1 dwarf is going to start with 75 gold. Now that you're set up, let me show you how to play. The game is going to break down into 3 rounds. We're going to buy equipment and then go through a run battling through the tunnels, and then buy another round of equipment and go for another run. There's a total of 3 runs. Before a run, we're going to buy equipment from the forge. I'll explain that in a second. After that, we'll go in to the tunnel, and as we go through, we're going to be dealing tunnel cards out to create battles with goblins, and I'll show you how that works. During the battles, you'll be able to either flee in the middle of a battle or flee between battles to get back to the main area, to go back to the forge, get paid off for all the goblins you killed, and to possibly get paid back for the bet you made. Now I'm going to clear this off and show you how to play the game with only the components you need at the various times. At the start of the game, the first thing you're going to do is you're going to buy a hammer and you're going to buy armor. So set your dwarves to each have full life, which is 10, and pick up your forge, and you're going to use this a lot like a menu to buy exactly the weapon that you want. The whole point here is that we're dwarves, and dwarves can forge anything they want, so get the exact weapon for your strategy. The way you read this, every table is going to tell you how many dice you roll, and then along the right side, there's the target you'd be rolling with those dice. For example, you might have a hammer that rolls 3 dice and hits on a 2 or more, meaning all 3 of these just hit. Or it could be rolling 2 dice and only hits on a 6 or more, which means both of those just missed. Of course, the better the chances and the better the weapon, the more it's going to cost. When you buy something, say for example, we want to get a hammer that rolls 3 dice and hits on a 4 or more, it's going to be 45 gold. So we would pay our 45 gold, here's 25, 35, 45, and put that into the hoard, and then we would track it by marking 3 dice, 4 plus. We'd then flip the card over and do that again for armor. One thing to note is that the very worst armor is free. So if you don't have enough money at the end, you could always just buy the free armor, which is 1 dice at a 6 plus. For the second dwarf on this team, I've paid 10 for a 2 6 plus hammer, and I've paid 15 for a 2 dice at a 5 plus armor. Your remaining gold could then be put into betting. Now let's talk a little bit about the dwarf cards themselves. First of all, they're double-sided, so there's a total of 8 unique dwarfs in the game. You've got your hammers tracked up here, your armor is tracked down here. Here's your life. When you get past or below 1, you are dead. You've got your dwarf's name, you've got a little bit about your dwarf, and there's a special ability. All 8 dwarves have unique special abilities. This one, for example, says once per attack roll, re-roll all ones. There's also some dwarves that have a trade-off where you pay life to receive the ability. To do this, you would spend 1 of your life, and now this dwarf would be able to say once per defense roll, deflect 1 goblin's attack. Now that your dwarves are geared up, place your team's bet based on which tunnel they think they're going to make it through. You place your bet by placing it right under the tunnel on your team's side. So here's both teams betting that they're going to beat tunnel 2. Here's a team betting that they're going to beat tunnel 3. The distance you go is going to give you different payouts. Let me show you the payouts real quick. If there is 1 dwarf on a team, this is how the payouts work. If they bet after tunnel 1, for every 2 gold you put in, you'll get 1 out. After tunnel 2, it's a 1-to-1 payoff, and then it's a 2-to-1 payoff, then a 3-to-1 payoff, and then a 4-to-1 payoff if you beat tunnel 5. For a team of 2 dwarves, all these values go up by 1. So I'm just going to move these down real quick. There's no payout on a bet for tunnel 1. The tunnel 2 payout is for every 2 coins in, 1 comes out, and then it's 1-to-1, 2-to-1, 3-to-1. Remember, your minimum bet is going to be 5. And while we're talking about rewards, when you pay out your bets, keep in mind that for every goblin you kill, you're going to get 1 gold. In this example, one team has bet 15 that they're going to beat tunnel 1, and the other team has bet 25 that they're going to beat tunnel 2. With both teams geared up and their bets made, it's ready to go into the tunnels for the first run. We know it's the first run because we set the run counter to 1. We set both teams' tunnel trackers to 1, and we begin. To make things easier for this video, I'm going to push these decks down a little bit so you're not going to see tunnel 4 and 5, but they're still there. I'm just doing it for the camera. This is what it looks like when the dwarves go into the mines on their first run. On their second run, however, we're going to add the trophy cards. So let's make a little space here, and it will look like this. And of course, these other trophies would be added to their corresponding tunnel decks off camera. That means that the first run through the tunnels, you can't win a trophy. But from the second run on, the dwarves can actually win a trophy when they pass that tunnel. To cut down on clutter, I'm going to make the explanation happen in the first run. When the dwarves enter the mines, they're going to be creating goblin encounters to see what battles they're going to fight. The way you create a goblin encounter is to look at your side's tunnel tracker and look at the step count. The tunnel that the tracker is next to is the tunnel that you're going to draw from first. And then the number on the card is going to tell you how many cards you're going to draw. So in this case, the first battle would be created by drawing 1 card for the team on the left and 1 card for the team on the right. After that battle is over, these will progress upwards and possibly move forward. To make an encounter when the card is higher, let's say we're at tunnel 3 and we're on step 4, you're going to start by drawing a card from the tunnel you're on, and then the next card is going to come from the next lowest tunnel. And in this case, I'm going to draw a total of 4 cards, so once I draw from tunnel 1, I start over at the tunnel I just pulled from. If I'm dealing out a goblin encounter and a card tells me to draw another one, like this one for example, which I'll go over in a minute, this one says, has a friend from tunnel 1, that other card that just got pulled out from tunnel 1 is going to go into battle, but it doesn't get counted as one of the 4 for the encounter. So I've gone 1, 2, an extra card, here's 3, and then here's 4. Now I'm going to talk about the goblins themselves. You can see here at the bottom they have 2 numbers. The one on the left is their power, and the one on the right is their defense. The power is how much damage they do to the dwarves when they attack, and their defense is how much damage you have to do to them in order to kill them. In this game, you have to do the full amount of their defense in order to kill a goblin. If you don't do the full amount, it's not going to die. So for example, if I did 1 damage to this one, it would die. If I did 1 damage to this goblin with a defense of 2, it would not die. When cards are killed, you take them and you put them in a dwarf's individual bone pile to count later when you exit the tunnels. If you don't kill a goblin, but you do enough damage to it that was half of its defense or more, the goblin becomes occupied. So for example, if I were to do 1 damage to this card, it would die. If I were to do 1 damage to this goblin, it would not die, but it would become occupied. To show occupied, you turn the card 90 degrees in either direction. It's 50% or more. So if I did 1 damage to this 3, it would not be occupied. If I did 2 damage to this 3, then it would become occupied. If I did 3 damage to it, it would have died. When goblins fight, they fight in a pack. So I'm going to deal these out. This is going to be 4. So here's number 1. Here's 2. They're here in the center in a pack. Here's the next one. This one says back of pack. So it is placed behind the main pack, furthest away from the dwarves. I'm going to continue. My 4th card for this encounter says front of pack. So this one is going to be placed in front of the pack. Now let's talk about the various positions in the pack. This is the pack. Here's the front of the pack. Here's the back of the pack. Goblins in the front of the pack are closest to the dwarves, and they purposely stand between the rest of the pack and the dwarves. When a dwarf attacks, it has to attack the goblins in the front of the pack first, before being able to hit any of the other goblins. If this goblin is killed, or if this goblin is occupied, then the dwarf can fight past it and start targeting the pack. However, to target a goblin in the back of the pack, everything in front of it must be either dead or occupied. So this dwarf could have killed this one, occupied this one, and now it would be able to attack this goblin in the back of the pack. Keep in mind, when goblins attack, they all attack at once. So right now, attack for 1, attack for 1, attack for 3, and attack for 2. All of that would be coming at the dwarves at once. However, if this one was occupied, and this one was occupied, then an attack of 1 and an attack of 1 would be coming at the dwarves. Some goblin cards have special text on them. This one, for example, says, has a friend from tunnel 1. When this card gets drawn, the special text gets executed. In this case, it draws another goblin from tunnel 1 and puts it into play, occupied. This one happens to be in the back of the pack, so we'll put it in the back of the pack. A couple other examples of special text. Some goblins will enter play, occupied, in which case you put them down at a 90-degree angle. When they're unoccupied later in the turn, you would just stand them straight up. Another special ability is the word tough. A goblin that is tough will not die when you hit it for its defense value. Instead, it will become occupied. In order to kill this goblin with tough, you have to hit it for a killing blow when it's already occupied. Then it will go to the dwarf's bone pile. If you're to hit this goblin for less than its full defense, nothing happens. So if I hit this one for 50% or more, it will not become occupied like all the other goblins. It only becomes occupied when it's hit for its full defense. Then it has to be hit again. Now let's just talk about rolling for a second in this game. In this game, you're going to roll a number of dice, and you're going to be looking for a target number. If you hit that target number or more, that's going to be a success. So for example, this dwarf has a hammer that is 3 dice and hits on a 5+. So this roll I just made with 6 and 2 4s was a success of 1. Try again. This was no successes because nothing's above 5. Again, this was 2 successes because there are 2 5s. That's how the dice roll in this game. One roll happens by itself. That is a complete roll, and it has successes. Another dwarf might be involved in the same turn and might also get a success. In this case, this dwarf rolls 1 die and succeeds on a 2 or more. So this 3 is a success. So we have 1 success here, and we have 1 success here. They are separate rolls. So this dwarf can hit for 1, and maybe, well, these are in the back of the pack. This dwarf could hit for 1 and maybe knock this one down. Now that one's occupied. This dwarf has 1 success, but it's not enough to knock down this one. And we've already discussed that. In order to kill a goblin, you have to do its full defense or more. When the goblins attack, in this case, attack for 1, attack for 2, and attack for 3, now the dwarves use their defense. They're going to use their armor to make defense rolls. This dwarf makes a defense roll with 2 dice, and for a 2 or more, it's going to defend. So both of these are a success for this specific armor, which means there's 2 successes happening here. This dwarf rolls 1 die and needs a 6 or plus. Ooh, wow. So it also got a success. So this dwarf has a roll that can block up to 2. This dwarf has a roll that can block 1. So the damage coming from this 2 is going to get blocked by this guy. The damage coming from this 1 is going to get blocked by this dwarf, but no one can block this 3. One dwarf must take it. They can't split it up. So the team would decide who takes it. Let's say it was this one. 1, 2, 3. We mark the 3 damage just by lowering the track for the dwarf's health. One thing you cannot do, you cannot just combine these 2 rolls together to get 3 successes and try to block this goblin. Instead, when you combine rolls in this game, you always lose 1 success. So just as an example, if I had 2 successes and another roll of 2 successes, and these 2 rolls wanted to be combined, you would combine one to the other and remove 1 success, and now that becomes 1 roll of 3 successes, which could be used to kill this goblin. So teamwork is possible. This extra success is just removed and discarded. All dwarves have the ability called extra effort, which means by spending 1 health, they are allowed to make an extra attack roll or an extra defense roll when those rolls are normally being made. So for example, when this dwarf rolls 3 dice, if it gets 3 successes, it has a chance of killing this goblin. There was nothing there. So it can pay 1 and try again. This time we've got 3 successes, and this goblin is killed. At the same time, if only 2 successes came up, this dwarf could pay 1 for extra effort, and then roll again. And now we have, let's say, 2 more successes. This dwarf could combine that first roll and the second roll together, remove 1 success, and have 1 roll of 3 successes from 2 rolls that were 2 successes. So let's say these goblins are attacking. They're attacking for 1, for 2, and for 3. The dwarves would make their defense roll. This dwarf has a success of 1. This dwarf, which had to make a 6 more, has no successes. So this could be used to block 1, and an attack of 2 and an attack of 3 would be coming in. Each attack must be fully taken by 1 dwarf. It can't be split up. So this dwarf could take 2, 1, 2, and this dwarf could take 3, 1, 2, 3, but they couldn't take 1 here and 2 there. Let's actually take a look at what it looks like to go into a tunnel and do a round of battle. In battle, there's a dwarf's turn and a goblin's turn. When the dwarf's turn is over, you switch to goblins and then come back, etc., etc. On your first run through the tunnels, the dwarves go first. So deal the encounter and dwarves go first. If this had been a 2 or more, then you deal the encounter and the goblins go first, which you can see is very important because 2 of these are already occupied, so there's going to be less coming at the dwarves. For now, let's just say we're on our first run. Dwarves go first. 5 things happen on a dwarf's turn. First, we check to see if they get away. Second, dwarves get to attack. Third, we check for a victory. Fourth, the goblins might get a reinforcement roll. And fifth, dwarves get the option to declare that they're going to flee. Let's go through those slower. First, if the dwarves said they were going to flee last turn, and they made it to the beginning of this turn, any dwarves who said they were trying to flee actually get away. They leave the tunnels, and they get to go back to the forge and get their rewards for their bets, possibly, and for the 1 gold per goblin they've killed. When dwarves attack, we covered a lot of that in the dice rolling. But what that looks like is, in this battle, for example, this dwarf would get to roll 3 dice. This dwarf would get to roll 1 die. And then they would apply their successes here to see if they killed any of these goblins. After the attack, we go to step 3. We check for a victory. If there are no goblins left alive, the dwarves have won and they can progress in the tunnels. And we'll talk about how that works in a second here. Step 4, we check to see if the goblins are going to make a reinforcement roll. A reinforcement roll means that more goblins will enter this existing battle. If you are on run 3 or more, we make a reinforcement roll. A reinforcement roll is going to be a die roll. What we're going to do is we're going to roll it, and if it's equal to or less than what the current tunnel is, we pull a card from that tunnel. So if we had rolled a 1, we would have pulled something from tunnel 1 and it would go right into play, occupied. If we had rolled a 2, we would have drew a card from tunnel 2 and that would have gone right into play, occupied. If we had rolled anything else, in this case, nothing would happen. Number 5, the dwarves get to declare if they want to flee the battle. 1 or both dwarves can flee. They declare it, and then the goblins get a free turn. If the dwarves are still alive at the end of the goblin's turn, at the beginning of the next dwarf turn on step 1, we say, oh, dwarves were trying to flee. We made it here to step 1. This dwarf gets away. And when the dwarves get back to the forge, they can get paid out for their bet if they made it, and they can get their 1 gold per head for the goblins, and they can upgrade their equipment. One thing to note is that when the dwarves take their turn, they both attack at the same time and they both defend at the same time. Also, the dwarf's turn and the goblin's turn are synced up across the tunnel. So both teams, the dwarves will be going at the same time, and we'll wait to make sure both teams are done. Then the goblins will go on both sides, and we'll wait until the goblins are done. Then the dwarves will go again. So it stays in sync on both sides of the tunnel. On a goblin's turn, they're going to do 2 things. All unoccupied goblins are going to attack, and the dwarves are going to make their defense rolls. After that, any occupied goblins will just stand up. If a goblin's turn begins and there are no unoccupied goblins, so they're all knocked down, then the dwarves get 1 free attack. The dwarves get an attack, and then after the attack, all of them stand up again. And now the goblins take their turn. If a dwarf's life ever gets below 1, they're dead. If 1 or more dwarves die on a team, the team is disqualified, the game is over, the other team wins by default. After a battle is over, let's say these goblins were killed, these goblins were killed, they all went into the bone piles for these two dwarves. Now the battle's over. We're going to see, have we gotten further along in the tunnel? The way to do that is you're going to look here to see what is this number. It's a 4. So roll that many dice, and you're trying to roll under the number of dice you're rolling. So I'm trying to roll a 1, 2, or a 3. I got a 1 and I got a 3, so we're good. We get to advance to the next tunnel. And when we do that, we set this back to 1. So if you think about that, on the first tunnel, on the first step, you're going to roll 1 dice, and you're going to try to roll under a 1, which you can't do. So you're naturally going to take a second step in this tunnel, deal 2 cards, do the battle, and then you'll be able to roll 2 dice and try to roll a 1. Nope. Do another battle, try to roll 3 dice, and try to roll a 1 or a 2. I got a 2. I move forward, set this back to 1. Regardless of whether or not you moved it forward or you just increase your step count, this is a moment before you deal the next battle where the dwarves are allowed to exit the tunnel with no penalty. As soon as you begin to draw cards, now we're creating a goblin encounter and the dwarves are in battle. So they will have to go through the rules of fleeing a battle if they want to run away. So when you start getting further ahead and you make it say tunnel 3, you might consider, well, maybe we're going to exit now rather than risk a battle with something we might not be able to handle. One thing to keep in mind about making the roll to advance: as soon as our battlefield is empty, the game pauses for the other player. And then we do what we're going to do. We make our roll. Let's see what happens. Oh, we actually got to advance. Set this to 1. And we're going to keep our turns in sync with the other team. So if we're in a first run where the dwarves go first in battle, this team is going to create a goblin encounter real quick, which is going to be 1 card. And then the dwarves are going to go at the same time. If we were on the second run, we would create this goblin encounter, and then all the goblins on both sides would go at the same time. So there's a moment, there's a pause there when one dwarf is advancing to make sure they stay in sync with the dwarves on the other side of the tunnel. So even though the 2 teams are going to stay in sync on the dwarf turn and the goblin turn, it is still possible for one team to get ahead. In between battles, if a team decides to exit, they go back to the forge, where they would get a payout for every 1 gold per goblin, and also their bet would be matched if they actually made it past their bet. If not, their bet just gets returned to the horde. They can go ahead and buy new equipment by either selling their equipment and buying more equipment, or just by looking at how much their current equipment costs and what kind of money they have to spend. For example, this hammer of 3 dice at a 5+ is worth 30 gold. The next level up is 45 gold. So I could just pay the difference, which is 15, back to the horde and upgrade my equipment. Remember, when you do your next run, on the second run, we're going to add the trophies, but you must also set aside at least a minimum bet of 5 for your next run. If you didn't set enough money aside for a minimum bet, you're going to have to sell some equipment. Like I could go back to that previous hammer, get my 15 back, and then I could have something to bet with. If you don't do all 3 runs, you don't qualify to win the game. You can also sell trophies at the forge. When you sell a trophy, you'll take the card, you'll put it into the horde, and take the value amount that was printed on the trophy. Just keep in mind, you need a trophy to win the game. So if you sell both of them here, and I get payout, I'm taking a risk that I'm going to get the next level up trophy on my next run. And if I can't, I might just lose just because I've got no trophy. At the end of the game, the team with the highest trophy wins. If there's a tie, we do another run to find out the tiebreaker. And you do another run by flipping this card over. We place 4 coins on it. And now goblins attack first, and goblins have a reinforcement roll. We'll do another run, we'll see who gets the best trophy, and if we have to do another tiebreaker, we can just add another coin for another run. Or if you just want to see if you can become a legend and go for the gold, see how many runs it takes you to do it. One optional rule in the game are these special cards. When you come across a special card, if you've never played this game before, just discard it. However, if you'd like to play with special cards, when you pull one, you roll a die, and whatever came up is the event that happens. And check the rulebook. Things like finding a wounded dwarf or springing a goblin trap could happen. One other optional rule, when one team clears their battlefield, they get to look at the other team's run tracker and then make a goblin reinforce roll for the other team. So the other team's battle could possibly have more goblins showing up. All right, thanks for watching, and don't forget there's a video for the short version of the rules and there's a video for a playthrough. You can also find out more about the game on DannyBurbel.com.